You've heard the expression, the stars have lined up. But what does it mean? It's not the red carpet outside the Oscars. It's that moment in time that can be an extended time when many of the variables, or at least some of them, that we need to happen at once have suddenly come to that point where they all are happening together, and that allows us to be able to move ahead in our plan or in our desires because the stars have lined up. We've gotten the job opportunity at the same time that we are finishing our master's degree, or the children have finished school and the stars are lined up. Well, and my story begins a long time ago when I really, at that moment, I was ahead of my game. I was on top of my game. I had completed my master's, I had done a fair amount of travel, had started up my own company, and several stars had lined up for me in terms of what I was doing with my life. When suddenly I got a call to come to see the new Prime Minister of our country. I went to his office and he sat there smiling and he said, "Find me an energy minister, or be it." I was aghast. I was shocked. I didn't want to be a politician. So I went ahead and I found him a minister, and he swore him in. But the only interview question was, "Are you the guy that Donald sent?" But then they came back to me and they said, "Well, we have the hardest job for you now. We want you to be the chairman of the national oil company, Petrotrin." Now, I just turned 34, and really I had a fairly arrogant approach to thinking I could do anything. So I said, okay. And I went on a road that was thrilling, exciting, scary, but extremely satisfying. First of all, I went through a preparation because I knew I had to make these stars line up. I analyzed, even before moving into the office, who were the stakeholders and how do we need to get them on board in order to be able to make anything significant happen. First place I went was to the head of the trade union, towering figure known for his militant approach. I went to his office and I said, "I'm about to be named chairman of Petrotrin, and I want to be on the same page with you as far as possible. There are things that I want to achieve, and there are things I know that you would want to achieve. I think that there's a huge amount of overlap. And if we work together in the areas where we coincide, we will get by the ones where we don't." And thus started an alliance that made many, many things happen as never before. The other stakeholders I had to get to were the employees. More than 5,000 permanent employees. Add another 10 to 15,000 temporaries, contracted employees. Then go outside of that to the ones who get business indirectly from the organization. I went and reached out to them. To do that, I had to break down the barriers, because in this command and control style, people on the shop floor never spoke to their own supervisors, let alone the managers. They weren't allowed to. So I started to have a breakfast meeting every Sunday morning with 10 employees taken at random. And I would sit with them and I would say, Ask me anything you want. Tell me anything that's on your mind. I promise you a response, but you must promise me that you will find 10 persons when you leave here, and you will ask them, you will tell them the same things that we discussed. And so the message started to go out. And the management, they were adopting a very traditional approach to change and to dealing with the board. They were taken up with reports and thicker and more colorful documents. And I knew they were not going to take us anywhere, because looking at the history, we did not make any major change internally. So I embarked on the sailboat analogy. I put out a message over and over that we are at a port, and this port is defined by a bureaucratic company, inward looking, loss making, oil spilling. And we want to go to another port at which there is a growth-oriented organization, an energy company delivering value to its stakeholders. But hear what? This is a sailboat. And when the sailboat sets sail, it will meet currents, it will meet storms, it will meet equipment failures. It will have to change course as we go. But the destination will not change. And we started to grow more and more people as part of this change management team that ultimately became the Petrotrin transformation. And we attacked all areas of the operation of the company, improving all the time. We worked in the communities, we reduced the oil spills, we delivered value to the shareholder. But I kept bumping into this statement here, where the people who would benefit from what we were doing were not always believers and weren't always there supporting the change. And more importantly, the ones who would be negatively affected by the change stood in the way as much as they could. And in fact, the resistance to change came from all kinds of sources. This was now a profitable company, each year making more profits than the year before, even when oil was trading at $9 a barrel. Because we were lining up these stars, we were actually forcing them into place by what we were doing. But where we had internal control, we could make things happen. But just on the periphery of the transformation, where we had to interface with external organizations, this is where the difficulty lay. Because they did not want to change. They were happy with the interface. Even the government. When I delivered the first dividend check that the company had paid in many years, even its predecessor companies, the officials didn't want to receive it. They said, leave it there by the secretary. And I said, no, we are working hard to make this company a profitable one. And therefore, I want to hand the dividend check over myself. Then someone came out and snatched the envelope out of my hand and said, Donald, you just want to show up everybody else. And I said, no. I want to show that if we could take the largest and most complex organization in the country, and maybe even in the Caribbean at that time, and run it properly, we could do so everywhere. I also ran into resistance from members of parliament and other kinds of officials who wanted something done for their constituent that I was refusing to do. But where we fell down was where we interface with the very large international corporations and local ones who had been accustomed to having their way with the company over many years. And now we said none of this. We took companies to court, we took them to arbitration, we just took them to the court of public opinion, and we forced many of them to fall in line and recovered hundreds of millions of dollars that would normally be lost and had been lost over the years. What I did not understand was, as much as I was forcing the stars to line up for the good things we were doing, I was building up too much negativity against what we were doing. And there was a point when this negativity became too much. And I had to commit a benevolent suicide in order to prevent a horrible, very corrupt deal that would have hurt generations to come. And in order to prevent it, I had to go all the way to being removed from the office. And in the end, I resigned, and the majority of the senior persons on the board resigned with me. But in the process, I set up an investigation that brought in former Scotland Yard investigators who prevented the deal from going through. But it was lost for me. I found myself in the wilderness, and I stayed there for 17 years analyzing what happened and attempting to move the stars into alignment for another project, which is the Caribbean Power Integration. It is needed. We have sufficient renewable energy to supply our needs and to move from 90% imported oil to 100% renewable. I've been working over the last 20 years to get these stars to line up. And I believe now that with climate change coming into force and being understood and accepted so much, the time now is right. I see that the stars are lining up again. There's another part to this story. Stay tuned.